nobody talk about my mama. Remember back in elementary school when one of the bad kids would taunt you by saying, yo mama? Oh, baby, those were fighting words. And why? Because don't nobody talk about my mama and get away with it. If it didn't lead to a physical fight, it definitely led to an argument. We never stop to think about the fact that that kid doesn't even know my mama. Hell, they don't even know me. All we knew was it made us angry. And we wanted to fight that person. Put paws on them. And usually that's what ended up happening. And now as adults, we know that we were triggered. Things didn't end there though. We either got sent to the principal's office or we got sent home. And if we did get sent home for fighting, well, you had a whole new set of problems on your hand because back in the day, our parents didn't play that. Especially if they had to leave work to come and get you. My mother used to say, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you. To which I replied, Mama, but they were talking about you. And when she asked me, what did they say about me? Those kids don't even know me. I just hung my head down low and I mumbled, they said your mama. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I felt really silly in that moment because not only was she right, I didn't even know how to fight, so I got beat up for defending my mother who didn't even need defending. They didn't know me or my mama. So, of course, they didn't say anything specific about her. Thinking back on that today, it sounds ridiculous, right? But it happened in childhood and it's still happening today in adulthood. No, nobody's saying yo mama, but they're mentioning your deceased relatives, people who they never met. It could be your mother, father, sister, brother, or child, family members that you cherish, whether they're alive or not. Then here comes that person. They just talked about your mama, or sister or daughter, and in your big age, you're ready to fight. It begs the question of, why are we so triggered by that? I'll tell you why. It's because of unresolved trauma. And when the bully knows which buttons to push, you can expect them to summon that trauma up again and again and again. You have to be a horrible and callous person to purposely do something like that. We all have moments when a seemingly innocent comment, a name drop, or just a reference can evoke an emotional response from us. And it doesn't matter if the situation happened many, many years ago. Our responses can range from being irritated to a full-blown anxiety attack once the anger or sadness begins to set in. But what's really going on beneath the surface? Why do we become so triggered? And what is it about certain people or statements that can cause this reaction from us? Being triggered happens when something in our environment, an event, a sound, a word, or even a memory prompts an emotional reaction from us. This reaction is bigger than what the situation calls for. It's like a snap of the fingers that pulls us out of the present moment and throws us into a rush of emotions, and we sometimes experience those physical sensations from the past. Being triggered, it can feel like an emotional time machine that takes us back to a moment where we haven't fully processed or healed from. You have to ask yourself, why does this even happen? Well, one way to understand is by looking at how our brain processes past experiences. The brain is wired to protect us. When something reminds us of a traumatic or a highly emotional event, our brains interpret that as a threat, even if no immediate danger exists. The brain alerts us to anything that might be potentially harmful or threatening. So when we experience something that reminds us of an unresolved incident from our past, the brain reacts. It triggers our fight or flight response. This kind of automatic response is going to bypass any rational thinking, which is why we find ourselves reacting emotionally without fully understanding why. In moments like this, we're not always in control of our emotions. And our response, it can be so intense that it feels overwhelming. For a lot of people, being triggered is closely tied to unresolved trauma. Trauma, as we know, can be the result of an abusive relationship. It could be a difficult childhood growing up, or a betrayal, or even witnessing a life changing event. When we experience trauma, our minds and bodies can store that event in ways that make it hard to fully process. Our brain knows how to compartmentalize these memories. It suppresses them, pushing them to the back of our minds. But the emotions that are tied to those memories, they don't always fade. And that's the really unfortunate part. When someone mentions a person or an event from that time period, it's like opening a door that the mind tried to lock away. That unresolved emotional baggage, it can quickly resurface even when the situation seems harmless on the outside. If someone was in a toxic relationship and their ex-partner's name comes up in a conversation, even if years have passed, the mere mention of their ex can bring back feelings of hurt or anger. And this happens because the emotional pain tied to the relationship, it hasn't been fully processed or healed. The memory associated with those emotions remains stored in the mind. It is waiting to be triggered by anything that reminds us of that time. Bullies know that. Trolls definitely know that. But it's not just our emotions that are affected when we're triggered. Our bodies can also respond in ways that we might not even expect it to. That fight or flight response, it can increase your heart rate. It can tighten up our muscles, or cause us to have shallow breathing. For some people, it can result into a full-blown panic attack. And if we're not careful, even a stroke. Our bodies attempt to prepare us for action, even though we might not actually need to take any immediate action. We have to recognize that these responses aren't necessarily under our control. When we're triggered, we're experiencing an automatic reaction based on our body's perception of a threat. This is why people may have an intense reaction to something as simple as hearing a name or recalling an incident, even if they're not consciously aware of why they feel so strongly about it. When we're triggered, we're not just reacting to the present situation, but to all the emotional weight we've been carrying from the past. The human mind, it's going to hold on to some memories, especially when there's been a strong emotional incident or trauma. Over time, your memories can create patterns or associations that link certain people, places, or even experiences to specific feelings. If you were betrayed by a close friend in the past, let's say, you might find that your reaction to new friendships is shaped by that experience. Even the smallest of incidents can make you feel suspicious or the need to guard your feelings. And this is because your brain is using your past to predict how things might turn out presently. Your brain reminds you of old fears and wounds. And that's why you hear things like, don't bring old baggage into your new relationship. Well, it happens unintentionally. But the new person can end up paying a hefty price for your past relationship hurts. Let's talk about how we can manage and heal from these triggers. The goal is not to avoid triggers altogether because, quite honestly, that's impossible. But we have to learn how to respond to them in a healthier way. The first step is to recognize that you're triggered. When you feel an intense emotional reaction, just pause. Take a moment to identify what's really going on. Name your feelings so it can also help you gain some control over the situation. You ever hear people say something like, "Oh, you trying to bring Big Bertha up out of me and you really don't want that." Try it. Name the feelings. Next, you want to ask yourself why you're reacting the way you are. Are you truly upset about what was said? Or is it reminding you of something else from your past? By getting to the root of your emotions, you can identify why you're being triggered. Being triggered, it doesn't always make you weak or overly sensitive. It just means that you have emotions that are tied to past experiences and that you're still seeking healing. So be kind to yourself. Give yourself permission to have feelings without judgment. If you find that past incidents or people continue to trigger you in ways that affect your well being, then it may be time to seek some professional help. It can really be beneficial to you. Therapists can help you work through unresolved trauma and teach you coping strategies for managing triggers. But finally, you need to practice mindfulness. It can help you stay grounded in the present when you're triggered. There are techniques like deep breathing, meditation, or just focusing on the sensory experiences around you. And that can help you reset and regain control over your emotions. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Unresolved emotions can surface if they're activated when you least expect it. Just try not to react impulsively or emotionally when triggered. I know it's a big ask, but keeping your composure can make your response way more effective and it helps the conversation stay productive. Know that by being triggered by someone or something from our past is a natural psychological response, even though it can be intense sometimes. It happens because our minds and bodies are connected to our past experiences. So it's important to develop emotional awareness so you can regulate your feelings before you respond. Understand the psychology behind triggers. It helps us approach them with more awareness. You can manage your triggers with mindfulness and reflection, and of course, through healing. And remember, being triggered is not a sign of weakness. Instead, I want you to look at it as an opportunity to acknowledge the need to heal from your past. By using this information, you can train yourself to respond to triggers more effectively. It helps you feel more in control of your emotions and your reactions. Sometimes, when a person is persistently hurtful or manipulative, it's best to just disengage. Their fire needs fuel in order to burn. Instead of igniting the fire, just let it wither away until even the smoke clears. I wonder what would have happened to that kid who said, "Yo, mama," had they just been ignored. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.